mentioned in the video that I made for law of cosines that if you have a side case, that you should always solve for the largest angle first. And I said that you should do that because you would find out in the side angle case that there's sometimes an ambiguous case. And when that occurs, you have two possible triangles. I think I just said in the video, like just take my word for it, solve for the largest angle first. But I want to walk you through why that's important now that we also know the ambiguous case and what should happen if, I'll walk you through this whole thing. Okay, so I always want you to solve for the largest angle first, given side. So let's say I have 12, 9, and 7. Then the angle I want to solve for would be angle A. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So law of cosines would be A squared is equal to B squared plus C squared minus 2 times B times C cosine of angle A. So let's go ahead and solve this. So that's going to be 12 squared minus 9 squared minus 7 squared is equal to negative 2 times 9 times 7 cosine A. We're going to divide by this. Notice that I'm not even actually figuring out what this is because I'm going to plug it all into my calculator at once. And then I have cosine A is equal to whatever this is. So then to undo cosine, I'm going to take cosine inverse. And again, I'm just leaving all this because I'm going to plug all of this into my calculator at once. And I'm going to make sure that I am in degrees mode. Okay, so let's figure out what this is. So cosine inverse of 12 squared minus 9 squared minus 7 squared. I get A is equal to 96.38 degrees, 379 really, but there we go. Okay, so I have one of my angles. Okay, so there's two different ways that you can solve for the other angle measures. So law of sines is usually easier. And that's what I typically recommend is just use law of cosines once, and then you can use law of sines. But you can use law of cosines to solve for the other angle measures. But the reason I want you to solve for the largest angle first is because then you can just use law of sines. So remember, this is an obtuse angle. What this gives me is, I know it seems strange, but this is actually the side angle case of law of sines. And I always want you to draw your ambiguous case of law of sines with your angle in this corner. The reason that this does not give you, it does not give you the ambiguous case of law of sines is because we have an obtuse angle. So as long as our obtuse angle, the largest angle, is across from the largest side length, then we can solve for the other angle measures, B and C, very straightforward. So I can just do sine of B over 9 is equal to sine of A over 12. Okay, I'm going to multiply both sides by 9. Take sine inverse, 9 sine A over 12. Now notice that I'm leaving A in my calculator. So I'm not actually plugging in the number 96.38. I am plugging in 9 sine of second answer. I leave A in my calculator, leave it in your calculator, and then use it in the next step. So that way you're not just using 3 decimal places, you're actually using like the full 10 decimal place accuracy. So you don't round A when you plug it back in. And then when I do that, I get B is equal to, let's see, real quick, 9 sine A over 12, sine inverse, and I get 48.190 degrees. And then for C, I can do 180 minus A minus B, and that gives me, 35.431 degrees. and then that solves for all three angle measures. So the reason that I want you to solve for the largest angle first is because if we end up with an obtuse angle, we do not end up with ambiguous case of law of sines. If we have an acute angle, we will end up with the ambiguous case of law of sines. So let's pretend like we had solved for B to begin with. Okay, so let's say I had solved, so I'm going to do this kind of in orange, okay? So let's pretend like I solved for B. So I did 9 squared is equal to 12 squared minus, plus 7 squared minus 2 times 12 times 7 cosine B. So I solve this and I end up with B is equal to 48.190 degrees. So you'll notice that that is the B that we ended up with here. So that B is correct. But then if I were to set this up as sine of A over 12 is equal to sine of B over 9, this is what would happen. I would end up with an A that is not actually the A, because when I set it up this way, so B is 48.190 degrees. The side length across from it is 9. This side is 12. And so notice that I'm not using C at all. So that's why I end up using, when I set it up this way, I'm using ambiguous case of law of sines, because I'm using the numbers 9, 12, and 48.19 degrees, and then angle A. So I am not using the fact that C is 7 at all. Now, if I solve for the height of this particular triangle, I end up with like 8 point something, which means I have the ambiguous case of law of sines. I could have my 9 here, or my 9 ends up being over here. Okay? And this is actually the triangle that it is. It's not an acute triangle. It is actually an obtuse triangle. So it actually, when you use ambiguous case of law of sines, it ends up being only the second triangle that works. The first triangle doesn't work. So I'm trying to show you why I always solve for the largest angle first. Again, if you have an obtuse triangle, you will not have ambiguous case of law of sines. Now, if you're worried about like the whole obtuse acute thing, then just don't worry about using law of sines. Just keep using law of cosines, and then you won't have any issues. So again, this is only the side, side, side case. If you have side, 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 I recommend you solve for the largest angle. If it's an obtuse, you can use law of sines, but if that whole thing confuses you, just keep using law of cosines, and then you won't have any issues. So I would set it up as, I already solved for A, so I could set it up as 9 squared is equal to 7 squared plus 12 squared. I already did this, but I erased it. 7 times 12 cosine of, what was I solving for? B. And then I would solve for B, blah, blah, blah. And then to solve for C, I would just do 180 minus B minus A, which I already solved for, right? And then that would give me what angle C is. So if the whole idea of like the ambiguous case of law of sines freaks you out, just keep using law of cosines. If you use law of cosines, you do not end up with the ambiguous case of law of sines. So just keep using law of cosines to solve. Again, there's so many different ways to solve these triangles, and sometimes you end up with law of sines ambiguity, and that's not fun to deal with. So if you want to just avoid it, just keep using law of cosines, and then you won't have any issues. Otherwise, like I just explained, if you have an obtuse angle, you can just use law of sines and you won't have any issues.